Welcome everyone to our webinar today. We appreciate you taking the time to come. We will have a shortened time frame today, so we won't take up probably the full hour. Today we're talking about automated security testing in Agile development and three main reasons to integrate it into your process. The webinar today is sponsored by Velocity Partners, a member of the Endava Group. Velocity specializes in nearshoring software services for clients in the United States. Endava has a global presence offering software development and IT services in the same manner globally. We've assembled a fantastic panel for you today. Bill DeVoe of Artemis Agile Consulting is an Agile coach, developer, consultant, coach for enterprise Agile communities. Sandor Lennart is an information security consultant at Endava, works with clients on an ongoing basis on issues of security in their software development. In addition, Radu Tinganianu, also an information security consultant at Endava, focuses on threat modeling, standards compliance, attack simulation, again, assessing security risks in software and IT. So welcome to our panel today. We're going to dive right in and talk a little bit about why are we here today. We've all heard the massively public stories in the press highlighting the importance of software and IT security, massive data breaches, massive corporate penetration breaches that have bricked company revenue for months on end. Bill, in your coaching practice and working with enterprises, what are DevOps and development groups saying about risk to software and how that's impacting how they do software development?
Well, it's a great area that I think we've really not ignored, but haven't really brought into the fold, so to speak, from an Agile perspective. A lot of the things that are going on, with Agile, our goal is to try to get value out to our customers quickly and consistently. One of the challenges, of course, is that security aspects and some of the things that we try to do to harden our systems are not perceived as having the same level of value to our customers that new features are or that bug fixes are. So in a lot of ways, the development efforts for our dev teams have been a little bit lackluster in this area. And then the integration with teams that are doing security, generally there's been a pretty hard and fast line between the development pieces and the security aspects. So teams are required to submit their code to be evaluated, but then they have to wait an awfully long time to get results back to find out where they have risks and threats. So what we see is that the developers are trying to move quickly, and then they end up sort of getting stalled while we're waiting for security to happen. But they're also not thinking about building security into their systems in the same way that they're building quality in and they're building features in. So I think that's probably, in my mind, the biggest challenges that we've had, and I think it's what's been evident from the breaches and the risks that we've had exposed on a regular basis here.
So it sounds a little bit like traditional security testing is still it's a laggard. It's still there, whereas a lot of the rest of the development process has moved to an Agile method and process that security testing still is done in a traditional way, and that's obviously not enough if we're seeing the kind of the results that we're seeing.
Absolutely, and I think the challenge that we have is that because a lot of companies are viewing security testing in the same way they used to view quality testing, which was something that happens at the very end of a product release cycle where we have to do it once because it's time-consuming, it's costly, it's all these things that you've got here on the screen. All of those elements sort of make it, well, we want to do it sort of once and done. The problem is that when we're not thinking about things from a security perspective while we're building them, then sometimes going back and building security back into it causes us to have to take several steps backwards from the development process, and it's not Agile in the slightest. So we end up really behind the eight ball, in a way of speaking, from having to have all of these different sort of constraints. We're building things in a very iterative fashion, and we're going along, and all of a sudden we have to come to a screeching halt while we do the security testing.
Right, so that has a massive impact on Agile process. So despite the limitations of traditional security, it still hasn't moved into that Agile realm. So like you said, releases take longer, development capacity or testing capacity gets sucked up in addressing security concerns, your efficiency. So you're losing all these advantages of running Agile.
Yeah, in essence what we're doing is that, we're running sort of Agile within a waterfall model. So we have, very clear, a lot of organizations are still using stage gate style life cycles. But what they've done is they've taken the requirements, analysis, design, and coding piece and shoved it all into an Agile process, but the endpoints are still very waterfall. And security testing tends to fall inside the acceptance piece of the code before it can be released. So as a result, as you pointed out, we do end up with a situation where our Agile processes are going along very smoothly, but then suddenly we have to stop as soon as we get to a release checkpoint or a milestone, and then go back and do these things. And even for DevOps teams, this can be a real challenge. They're trying to do things and get development, putting their code into production, but every time that they try to do that, if they're stymied by having these security blocks, then we're definitely not getting any of the benefits that we would look for from a DevOps style model. Got it.
And this may be a difficult question to answer, but really for anyone on the panel, do you attribute this to anything? Do you see any patterns as why is security and even sometimes just testing in general not being pulled into the Agile environment? And do you attribute that to anything in particular? It is a difficult question to answer.
Yeah,
I'm sure it varies. I'm sure it varies by company and client too.
Go ahead, Radu.
Yeah, I think it's maybe they forgot to think about security, and maybe they shove everything at the end of the life cycle, and okay, let's do it in a hurry way, or I don't know why.
So it just hasn't
exactly.
So it just hasn't really. The proactive approach of Agile hasn't really just reached that yet. It's still an afterthought in a lot of the people you work with.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. All right. Well,
and, I'll chime in too, and I would say that my experience is that generally the teams are very small, they're very specialized, and the way that we would look at like architecture or potentially UX. Our security teams, we can't look at simply staffing a security person on every team. And so a lot of organizations look at it as a shared service, and then that service has to be managed very closely. And so they have a very clear, here's the inputs and outputs from that team. And I think that's one of the main challenges for traditional models, and that's why we see this really hard stop before we get to security testing.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So when we get to automated security testing, then delivering on the Agile promise with the security aspects of a project as well, you start to get those benefits, right? Increased velocity. You overcome some of those limitations of that stage gate or waterfall method, and it's looking more and more with the pace of threats that automated security testing or building in security from the start is really becoming a must-have, not a nice-to-have. Would you agree?
Yeah, it absolutely is. Yeah, the benefit here, of course, is that what we can do within an Agile environment, especially with automation, is instead of having 2 or 3 people on the security team, we can begin to devolve some of that responsibility into the teams using the same tools that the security team is using, but automating that process so that the team has an opportunity to do some of the stuff in advance and have a continuing way of evaluating their software as they're developing it, so that, again, it's not this hard stop, wait for the results, and then get stuff back. we can end up with a much different model that's going to better support our Agile development and especially support DevOps models.
Okay, so in the typical sort of Agile, model, as we see here, test now it includes security, it includes unit and functional testing, it includes really you want to take a more holistic, it sounds like, approach to that sort of test as part of each sprint, as opposed to the traditional model where, again, you're waiting till the end. And what we're not showing here is after test, we show a release block, but more often than not, I imagine it probably resets you back to somewhere in the middle of the code block.
Yeah, and actually in a lot of cases what we end up seeing is that code block expands out because scope has changed or because we uncovered something that we weren't able to resolve easily. So that test area ends up shrinking down pretty significantly and potentially even shifting out. 90% of our traditional projects fail to deliver on scope project or scope date or budget. And that's going to be reflected as part of that, those challenges. So as the code piece expands, the test piece shrinks, and the release date doesn't move until it absolutely has to because we passed that date. Whereas in the Agile testing model, as we have this back and forth between testing and coding, if we can do the automation as part of that, then we're going to have the ability to shorten those cycles and put things into a production environment, or at least release it for, so it's ready to be into production in a much shorter time scale, and as a result, have a much better time to market, much better feedback. Definitely aligns a lot better with like the lean startup model from Eric Ries that helps us vet our ideas and establish, are we on the right path here? And if we include security testing in that, that's going to help us.
Well, I'm glad you took that route, Bill, because it's a great segue into the meat of the session today, which is really the reasons why you should be automating, security testing and applying Agile methodologies to your security needs as well. So there's a multitude of reasons why it'll benefit organizations, and today we're going to focus on three major ones. And I'm going to start off and warn the audience that these are probably going to be a blinding flash of the obvious. But it's worth some discussion about the practical impact of knitting security and automated security testing into the core Agile process. So let's get into some of those. So, Bill, time and money seems like an obvious gain, and you mentioned it in your lead-in here. Tell us a little bit about, in your experience, like how does this happen in practice? And actually, I'd open this to the whole panel. In practice, when you're working with clients, when you're working on either their Agile process or you're working specifically on security concerns for software development, how do you see, the money and the time savings actually occurring?
Yeah, so I'll start off, and then I'd like, maybe Radu can chime in. But from my perspective, the main benefits here is that the time for rework is lessened dramatically. As a result, we don't have to go back. We don't have to, develop new code. We don't have to retest that code and then put it back through that process. So we've reduced the cycle time for doing that loop down pretty significantly. So as a result, we're saving ourselves a lot of that rework time, and that rework time is developer, tester, and security team cost. So by doing these kinds of things, we absolutely save ourselves money by doing that. And if we can make sure that we're giving our teams the right kind of stuff, when our security teams the right kind of stuff to validate, by getting rid of sort of the base problems that we run into, then we can help them, really, we can maximize the effort that they're going to be putting into the project rather than having to do all the boilerplate stuff and then having to move into more esoteric things. We can sort of take care of the boilerplate stuff and save ourselves some time and money there.
So it's almost you get double the benefit, because not only are you not wasting the time you'd be wasting on rework, which we all know in a waterfall or stage gate process, the late stage changes are more expensive, which is kind of where rework falls into. But you're actually capitalizing on what would have been lost opportunity cost. So you're actually getting more.
Absolutely. Yeah. Very good point.
So, Radu, in preparing for today's session, you had recounted, you work with organizations throughout the software development lifecycle, and shared a story about one of your clients. I'd wonder if you could share that with the audience today.
Yeah, sure. So one of the clients I worked for got to the conclusion that if they would have integrated the security testing during the software development lifecycle in an early phase, they would have saved a lot of rework and money lost during re-architecting the solution, exactly like Bill said. So the client asked for this, the security assessment only after the functionality was implemented, really in the acceptance testing phase. So during this activity, several critical issues were identified that could cause a lot loss either to the business image or could lead to money loss if the vulnerabilities would get exploited by an attacker. Therefore, we came up with a solution easy to be integrated in the CI/CD pipeline, and we have proposed and implemented the automated solution that checks for security vulnerabilities after each build is pushed by the development team. So this approach gives a fast feedback about the current security status of the system by running the solution for no more than 10 minutes. So in a shorter time, you will have a feedback about what's the status of your system. The automation security setup was configured to run the complete assessment, which take a considerable amount of time. So it's approximately 4 or 5 hours to complete. And that would be executed out of the working hours in order not to interfere with day-by-day activities, in order to not take down the servers or mess up with others. So in the next morning, the security specialist had the report generated and ready to be analyzed for the false positives. And for the most and high confident vulnerabilities identified during the automated security check, there were opened Jira tickets. Details in these Jira tickets, we have provided details in order to help the development team to reproduce the vulnerability, and together with some remediation guidance in order to help them to fix those issues. So this is pretty much what we did for this client, and as a matter of fact, we managed to decrease the time of investigating and fixing the problems discovered from 2 weeks somewhere to 2 or 3 days, as the security assessment runs after each code pushed on the pipeline.
Well, so in that case, yeah, when we're talking about time and money savings, and in business, time and money are the same thing. When you said weeks to 2 or 3 days, that's approaching a 7-fold reduction in cost, and also accelerating basically their time to market. That's incredible. So it's a real impact. Excellent. Well, that having a real world example of any of this is sort of the proof is in the pudding. We can hear the consultative advice, but then seeing it in action is always helpful. Let's talk about the next reason that we should all be looking at integrating automated security testing as part of our normal Agile process. Is it actually increases our testing capabilities, so we can do things that we haven't done before. So maybe can we talk a little bit about some of those things that you gain by switching your paradigm?
Yeah, one of the biggest things here, and it kind of goes back to Radu's point, is that as we're able to identify problems earlier in our process, and as we begin to change our mindset from thinking about things from a making something work to a how do I figure out if it is working, how can I break this, and then trying to find ways to harden our solutions so that they can't be broken or they're less apt to be broken. We actually improve not just the security of our products, but the quality of our products. And in essence, what we're doing is we're shortening the time required to deliver these things too. So the benefit, obviously, of doing automation is that it can do the same. It can do these kinds of validations on a recurring basis. Even if you're not looking at a CI/CD, continuous integration or continuous deployment model like you would have for DevOps, still just having the ability to run through a regression test suite in hours instead of weeks or even days really strengthens the ability of your team to put something out and get it vetted in front of your clients and your customers very quickly. So by shifting these things around, we're able to reduce the level of manual testing that's going on, and manual investigation and things, and we can actually begin to really turn our teams to focus on those things that are more esoteric, as I mentioned earlier, things that are harder for us to evaluate from an automation perspective, but still we know that they're going to happen. We can simulate a denial of service attack very easily with automation. It's very, very difficult to do that kind of thing without using automation. So there's a lot of things that are open for us to test, and it allows our teams, not just our security teams, but our test teams and our development teams, to focus on those areas where there's not potentially high risk, but just sort of unusual risk, or maybe some uncertainty around the code that we're developing, to find ways that we can validate our product and make sure that we're actually doing a high-quality product. And then to Rada's point, as we move into CI/CD, this becomes critical. This helps us validate things before we put stuff into production very quickly and effectively.
That's a great point. I love the example of the denial of service attack, too, especially since we're talking about security. I think even in just IT in general and in software, people are thinking a lot about perimeter defense and penetration testing and things like that. But even denial of service attack, it's almost like a load-oriented type test. And I agree, with automation, without automation, it's a very difficult thing to simulate, whereas now you can run it after every sprint. One of the things I want to mention to the audience, as we go, we're covering a lot of topics quickly. If you have any questions or you want us to delve into something deeper, go ahead and use the question entry box in your webinar control panel. Go ahead and enter your questions there, and then we can kind of cover those at the end. So we talked about increasing testing capabilities. We talked about time and money. Let's talk a little bit about the third major reason you should be considering automated security testing, is just simply making your team more productive. So instead of your team being wrapped up in testing, we talk about all the different things that your team could be doing otherwise. So Agile has established itself as a methodology for productivity and plainly a higher quality of outcome. Does that apply to automated security testing in Agile?
Absolutely, and it's actually one of the critical elements, one of the pillars that's going to help teams really achieve high levels of success. As we move toward DevOps, as we move toward even just continuous integration or continuous deployment, the ability to have the automated testing suite run through everything that we're building. The benefit of the automation is that we're continuously adding on to it. So every time that we're doing testing, we're testing more than we tested last time from an automated perspective. So it's sort of a build it once and we can validate forever kind of thing, and practically for free as time goes on. The cost of validation drops dramatically over time with things that we build early. So the more we do it and the earlier we do it, the bigger the gains are going to be for us. That also is going to help our team focus on, working on features and guaranteeing for themselves and for the business that what we're building is going to be good quality stuff, and that we're not breaking things that we built before. So there's a lot of validation elements here that help the team understand what's going on, but also help the business really get that level of confidence that they need in order to know that, yea, verily, we are putting out a good quality product because we have all these tests and we know exactly what's being run.
Right, because there's more than one way for that to fail. So if we're spending all our time on manual testing and then dealing with security issues, then we're not focusing on the things that Agile was meant for, which is getting user stories right, getting user features, and having that high interaction with customers to make sure what we're producing is useful and of high quality. So it's a great point that productivity yields itself or manifests itself in a variety of different ways.
Yep.
I'd love to turn it over to Sandor at this point. Sandor, you've worked with teams on projects where they've struggled to maintain agile velocity or productivity through the testing process. Can you tell us a little bit about the example that you shared with me earlier?
Of course. Well, usually the clients that come to us and for which the teams are working on are already require some sort of agile methodology to be applied, right? So hence from here you need the automation, right? Because you already have build, deploy, functional automated functional testing and so on in the pipeline. But what you don't have, and what usually it's a traditional approach, as Bill mentioned, is the security process. When I already saw in a couple of examples, teams have waited, for example, even a couple of months to come back to have the feedback from the security team. And yet again, this is translated to time to market from software perspective. Something else to be added here. Yeah, something else to be added here is that once you add security in the continuous pipeline, or to have the teams analyze the reports as well, you raise awareness. From there on, the new code, for sure, the teams will have an eye on security as well.
Excellent. Well, what really struck me when you recounted the story is, the tradition. We talked about the traditional model, being waterfall or stage gate, and security being sort of a laggard, where it sounds like organizationally a lot of companies still have a development group which may be pushing agile methods and automation, but then you have a separate security department or a security group, and that's part of the problem why automated testing isn't used, because it's the core development group that's adopted those practices isn't in charge of security. Is that something that you see fairly often?
Of course, was mainly in financial, healthcare type of projects. This is something that we see day by day. It's
so is that because that they're highly regulated and that they have so many compliance criteria that they've set up a whole department just to deal with that?
Well, mainly yes, but if you think of it, if you automate these kind of processes or all the processes, then you have fast forward in everything, and even security can be automated in some sort of way. Of course, you won't be able to cover one experienced team to have the validation, to have a full validation, but at least you can do that based on important milestones, right?
Okay, so whatever the methodology you use, or whatever the process you use to break down those barriers, it sounds like it's important to get those teams talking, because we shouldn't be treating those requirements separately, right? You've got automated unit testing, automated security testing should not fall outside that. So it's really a matter of finding the ways to integrate those for however your organization is set up. Is that fair?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So, again, guys, we started out today saying that a lot of this was going to be blinding flashes of the obvious. Yes, we believe we can save time and money whenever we automate something, whenever we move to an agile sort of framework. Yes, we are making our teams more productive. And yes, we actually increase our capabilities and capacities adopting these things. Heard a couple examples from our panel. Thank you, everyone, for participating today. So today was a bird's eye view. We'll actually share, if you've registered today and attended, we will share a white paper that we've produced that actually delves into these a little bit more in a little bit more detail in terms of some of the misconceptions that are holding on to this traditional model, preventing adoption of automated security testing, how those automated tests can enhance each stage of Agile development, and then which activities automation can take off your team's plate. So when we talk about productivity, where do you win? So we'll share that with you after this. Also, want to give thanks again to Velocity Partners and Endava Group. They do focus on extending your software development teams. So if you are struggling with resource capacity or in bringing distributed Agile or automated security testing into your organization, that's what Endava does, and Velocity Partners is your U.S. group. So by all means, please get in touch with them. I'd be happy to consult on what you're struggling with. And they've got delivery centers in the Americas in a variety of geographies to help with a variety of different software and IT development problems. So thank you for attending today. We will get that white paper out to all of you for attending. And if you have additional questions, we'll get you the contact information for Velocity Partners as well. They would be happy to help. So thanks to our panel, thanks to our audience, and we will free you up for the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.